Here we go. Welcome to Ororo Comics Podcast. My name is Carla, and I am a wife, a mom, a nurse, and the creator of Luna, the Queen of Maru, an award-winning comic book published by Concrete Comics.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Ebony Toussaint, and I'm also a wife and a mom, soon to be nurse. I'm a research scientist in my spare time, and I investigate faith, food, and Black futures. This is a safe space where we discuss the intersection of health, culture, and comic books.
All right. So we just finished interviewing Dr. Kiana Whitted. That's an amazing interview. Can't wait. Actually, when this airs, you've already heard the interview. So um, I just, again, the more I dive into this world of comic books, the more impressed and
Mm.
surprised I am about how many of us Black creatives are in this space and this subculture of Black academics and comic studies that I had no idea existed. And it really just validates my identity and passion in this space. And um, as you know, Marvel, out of DC, Marvel and some of the other publishers, Marvel is one of my favorites. Second to Concrete Comics, but Marvel is definitely my second favorite. And Marvel is celebrating its 85th anniversary. And so over at Marvel, we've already kind of seen like the videos on social media, but over on Marvel.com, they have this article called Marvel's 85th Anniversary, Marvel Comics Through the Decades. So just a little bit about Marvel. On August 31st, 1939, the release of Marvel Comics issue 1 birthed something special, the Marvel Universe. From the streets of New York to the far reaches of the multiverse, the Marvel Universe opened readers up to countless strange tales and journeys into mystery with its heroes and villains. And since its early days as Timely Comics and Atlas Comics, the House of Ideas has chronicled the adventures of the sensational, the uncanny, and the astonishing. So, just kind of some of the highlights from over the years. I want to take it all the way back to the 30s, where I just mentioned that the very first Marvel comic was by Carl Burgos, and it featured the Human Torch. And then also in that same year, we were introduced to Namor, the submariner, who began his war against the surface world by attacking deep sea divers and their salvage ships. And we saw Namor, kind of a adaptation of Namor in Wakanda Forever. So I'm looking forward to seeing that character on the screen more. In the 1940s, we were introduced to Steve Rogers and Captain America. That's kind of, and also Patsy Walker, which is, I don't think Patsy Walker, we haven't really seen anything outside of that decade of her, but Millie the Model and Patsy Walker were also popular titles at that time. The 1950s, we see The Black Knight. We also see monster focused titles such as Men's Adventures and the early days of Journey into Mystery, which introduced Gorilla Man. All right. So then 1960s, this is probably where we start seeing where the characters we kind of know are more popular. The Fantastic Four, which of course brought Doctor Doom. We also are introduced to Black Panther, Silver Surfer, and of course Galactus and the Inhumans. And then we have several new heroes like Iron Man, Thor, the Hulk, where they're all introduced in the Avengers. So Fantastic Four and the Avengers were like the major highlights of the 60s. The 1970s, we saw um, the X-Men expands into giant-sized X-Men, and we're introduced to Storm, Aurora Monroe, Nightcrawler, Colossus, and Wolverine. Also, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and the Punisher, as well as Ghost Rider, Moon Knight, and Blade.
The 70s was amazing, okay?
Wow.
Y'all don't forget Brother Voodoo. I'm gonna throw Brother Voodoo in there in the 70s.
Yep. And of course, I'm forgetting Spider-Man. Spider-Man was also introduced as well. So the 1980s, again, we see the Spider-Man kind of takes off. We also see extensions of the established storylines, such as the X-Men kicked off a decade of expansion with the Dark Phoenix saga and Uncanny X-Men. And also um, we also were introduced to new mutant heroes like Rogue, Cable, Psylocke, Kitty Pryde, and Emma Frost. And then in the 1990s, we saw the storylines continue, but new characters were also introduced in the X-Men: Gambit, Bishop, Carnage, Ghost Rider, a different Ghost Rider, and also Spider-Man 2099. And the storyline Age of Apocalypse was also debuted in the 1990s, and this was an alternate reality. And I think that's where we saw, I can't remember, but I think this is where we saw Storm and Wolverine get
Mm.
married. I think.
Oh gosh, the 70s, we forgot Blade too. Ugh, Blade and Brother Voodoo. How can I, yeah, I mentioned Brother Voodoo, but I
Hmm.
forgot Blade.
Hmm.
But I think of
Then,
course, Wesley Snipes popularized him in the 90s, but yeah, 70s comic books.
yep. In the 90s was also the Thanos snap. Yeah. The 2000s, we see that the 2000s kind of brought this they kind of reimagined the universes. Like I was telling you before, I started reading The House of X and Powers of X, which is like before, it's like the start of the Krakoan age. And it's just everything's kind of reimagined. And different storylines were introduced. So we didn't really see a lot of new characters, but we did see some characters introduced in the Avengers, such as Jessica Jones. And then also we were introduced to storylines that were centered around King the Conqueror.
Hmm.
So the 2000s kind of was like an extension of the 1990s, but probably better writers. Because if you talk to like comic book fans of the night of those who were reading the comics in the 90s, they say that the 90s wasn't as good as the 80s.
Yeah, a lot of people kind of stop reading comics around then. I've talked to a few friends that are older, like in their 50s, and they've mentioned like the 90s. They kind of like, eh.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't realize, I mean, that's why I mentioned Blade, because Blade kind of low key, maybe high key saved the Marvel universe. And that's how we've gotten to reimagine many of these characters that were introduced in the 70s and 80s in comic books now in the 21st century. And I want to say Marvel was in such dire like financial stuff. I was talking about this with a friend that they ended up having to sell some of the rights to certain characters. I want to say it was Spider-Man, and that's why we get like a bunch of like these Spider-Man movies
Mm-hmm.
because they got to make some money. So that's why we're like, the Spider-Man meme, like we got so many of them because they got to keep the Spider-Verse going. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think Marvel fully owns Spider-Man. I'll double check that.
I mean, maybe the comics, maybe, but not definitely not the film rights. And then the article goes on to talk about the 2010s, I guess we should say 2010s and 2020s. Um, but I think the I would say like the essence of Marvel was probably born in the 1970s. Because that was we still see those same characters and those same storylines reimagined, yes, but we still see those same characters. So and our favorite character, Aurora Monroe, was birthed in the 70s. So I think out of all these decades, I think the 70s is my favorite. What about
Same.
you?
Same. I like I said, Blade and Brother Voodoo alone, because I love horror.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, which I really would love to see. Marvel, if you're listening, I don't want to build a snowman, but do you want to do a Brother Voodoo movie, please? I know you got to probably mention him with Doctor Strange somehow. We can include the Sorcerer, Surgeon Supreme, or whatever, but I'd really like a Brother Voodoo movie. So just for your girl, just Marvel, just putting my heart out there. But I would agree, 70s is my favorite. I did confirm Marvel did sell Spider-Man to Sony. And so they had to sell off one of some of their most popular characters in the 1990s to they went bankrupt. Yeah, so
Wow.
sorry. happy 85th anniversary, but also they had to do the thing to save Marvel. So yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's so interesting because Disney actually, I don't know if they went bankrupt or they were about to go bankrupt and back in early 1900s, but they put out Snow White. Snow White was what saved them.
Wow, I didn't know that.
They kind of like, okay, then we need to start doing that. We need to start reimagining these characters, these fairy tales, and turn these into movies, which is how we came across Cinderella, how we got Beauty and the Beast, and things like that. So it just speaks to the fact that your story is never written in full. You always can change your story. You just have to be creative and think outside the box. Speaking of thinking outside the box, though, Hollywood is in trouble. Hollywood is this story from Forbes says that Hollywood loses 10 billion a year for refusing to invest in stories that feature people of color. So I'm not surprised. I actually saw this story. I actually saw this study from McKinsey years ago, like probably about 5 or 6 years ago, and I was really curious to see if anyone would make a big deal about it. No one did. However, lately I've been seeing articles about it. So this article is from Forbes, and it says that the U.S. movie and television industry is estimated by McKinsey to bring in 148 billion annually and could increase annual revenue by 7% or about 10 billion a year by improving Black representation on set and on screen, according to the report. Audience interest for diverse storytelling is on the rise, McKinsey found. Between 2017 and 2019 alone, demand more than doubled for new television projects that featured casts made up of at least 40% racial and ethnic minorities. However, Black-led projects are still underfunded and undervalued in Hollywood, according to McKinsey. So McKinsey, if people aren't familiar with McKinsey, are they don't have any skin in the game. They are objective. They do these studies, um, conduct these studies, and they would just report on what they find. And they sample a pretty well represented portion of whatever they're studying. So we can actually have confidence in these reports. So, as for television, representation varies greatly based on the platform. In 2019, 14% of lead actors on cable programs and just less than 12% on broadcast programs were Black, but shows with Black lead streaming platforms accounted for less than 5% of the industry total. Black on-screen talent is often limited in the types of roles available to them, McKinsey found. When studios are looking for Black content, they're looking for Wakanda or poverty with no in between, one creative executive told the consulting firm. So again, those who they sampled are people who actually work in Hollywood. So this is not, Carla saying this. This is people who actually work in Hollywood and what they have seen behind on set and on screen. So it's crazy to me that Hollywood would rather lose money than put money into these Black centered projects. Now, of course, we do have projects that weren't successful, but I don't think it had anything to do with racism. I think it just had to do with it just wasn't a good script. For example, Acolyte. I personally did not. I thought Acolyte could have been written better.
Mm.
Um, I could not get past the second episode because I just when you compare it to other projects, like even with Star Wars, you compare it to other Star Wars projects, it just was not hitting for me. And I'm not a Star Wars fan, but I do support Black centric projects. But I just think that sometimes it really gets under my skin when I know that they've only put they have this script that wasn't written by a Black person. They put a Black person in the lead role, and then they blame the black actor for why it failed, or they blame racists for why it failed. Racists didn't cause the demise of Acolyte because they don't have that much power. Money is why. Money and viewership is what determines whether a show is renewed or canceled. And I just think that people just didn't like the script, didn't like the story. I don't think it had anything to do with her color. I couldn't get past the second episode. I just thought it wasn't entertaining, it wasn't intriguing, it wasn't engaging. Um, Whereas you have projects like, of course, Avatar or Supercell, and Abbott Elementary, and what's the other one? Bel Air. They all are very engaging and very funny and well written, and really speak to the type of entertainment we want to invest our time in. You know, if you're asking us to invest time in a project, make sure that project is worthy of our time.
Agreed.
So, and Supercell. What did you think about Supercell?
I loved Supercell. Okay. I binged it with my good dear friend Portia, who's also a nurse. Shout out to Portia Buchongo. I love you, girl. Supercell has been renewed for another season. In case y'all don't know, Supercell is about sickle cell disease, which impacts African Americans more than any other racial or ethnic groups. And it involves the sickling of the blood cells into the shape of a sickle. You know, think about the scepter that the Grim Reaper holds. And this makes it more difficult for our blood cells to transport hemoglobin, which is the protein in our blood that delivers oxygen to our tissues and our organs. They can also cluster and cause pain and crises, especially in moments of stress and dehydration. I think a lot of people know T-Boz from TLC has sickle cell disease and has battled this throughout much of her life. And in a time where Black-led shows are being canceled, we are thrilled to see Supercell continue on Netflix. Also on Netflix, you know, strong Black leads, shout out to them. Know one of the people that's working on that behind the scenes. More on that maybe in another episode on the pod. But A Different World sequel is coming about Dwayne and Whitley's daughter. So what are your thoughts about that, Carla? Did you watch Different
It's,
World back in the
of
day?
of course, I think we all did. I can't wait. I can't wait, and I do hope that they have the writers that they need, because when you compare, because we're going to compare it to Different World, we're going to compare it to that. So you got to have the writing in place, you got to have the actors in place, you got to have a good director who's willing to push, kind of push past the boundaries. And so, like in today's setting, like some of the topics that Different World talked about, it was like, oh my gosh, why are they talking about it? It's common and normal to talk about them now. Like I remember one of the episodes was about HIV.
Mm-hmm.
That was something
Keisha
like
Campbell's
taboo.
character. Yeah,
Yeah,
he had HIV. Yeah.
yeah. It was something kind of like taboo back then. But and then also, SA on the first date, and remember Freddie was
Mm,
essayed on by that
yeah.
one guy who played what's his name? What's his name? I forgot his name. But they talked about adult topics and
Mhm.
things that we went through, not we went through, but people go through as they are coming of age and in college and things like that. So a lot of these
Discrimination,
topics.
dating. Yeah.
Interracial dating, yep, was a big one too. Domestic violence was one. I just remember all these really hard hitting topics that Different World covered. So I hope that they bring that into this sequel, and I hope it's just not all comedy. I hope they find that beautiful intersection and blend of comedy, but also these real topics and this social commentary that Different World was known for.
I think that's why
And
Abbott Elementary is doing so well because they find a good balance of talking about not just like issues with our public education system, but like just real life challenges, budget and campaigning, finance. They bring in sports and society and culture and just all these different topics, looking at children's home situations, all these hard hitting issues, I think, like you said, but they make it's funny. They're not making light of the issues, but they present it in a way I think that's palatable. On the other hand, I will say I've seen some criticism about Bel Air not striking a good balance and kind of being more of a dramatic kind of more drama versus the kind of funny, whimsical feel that we got in the 80s and 90s from Will Smith's character. They said they kind of turned all of those light-hearted things into like more intense, woke or whatever. And it's just like,
right,
no, if you paid attention to the first show, you might have laughed. We all laughed, but they definitely did the same thing. So,
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
like what the writers did with this. It didn't need, to me, it didn't need to be the same. And I hope Different World thinks that too, that it doesn't need to be the same whimsical feel of the 80s and 90s. But yeah, include the smart issues. And of course, I want to see some cameos. I want my cameos. Marissa Tomei, I need my cameo. Lisa Bonet, I need my cameo. Anybody that's still alive. It doesn't have to be even the same character. They could just, like how Stan Lee would pop up in the different
Exactly.
just pop
Yeah.
them up in there somewhere random.
I definitely want to see Kadeem Hardison and Jasmine Guy. Like that's if it's their daughter, we should see them.
You should
And
see
I
them.
don't I would love for them to be a regular, like a
Mhm.
regular cast member too. But I can't wait till that comes out. And I'm sure, with the success of Supercell, the Netflix is now okay. We know where we need to go. You need to have good writing, you need to have a budget, and you need to have actors. If you
Hashtag strong
have
black lead.
Yeah, you have those three things, then you got it. You got it. You're gonna have subscribers sign up every month. So I want to also take a little moment to recognize a sponsor of the podcast. Of course, I our coins have been invested in this podcast, and I just want to just remind everyone that my comic book Luna, the Queen of Maru, issue 1 and issue 2 are now available. Luna is a futuristic, heartfelt, superpowered adventure that features characters of color that will remind everyone, especially our children, that they are loved and have the power to change the world. And you can get issue 1 and 2 now available on the Concrete Comics website. All right. So I saw this article that I'm like, okay, this reminds me of Ebony. So this it's a black owned comic book shop which is okay, let me back up. An assistant principal by day, Ramon Edmondson has found success as the owner of a comic book shop on the west side of Indianapolis. He runs Prideland Comics and Collectibles, the only Black owned comic book store in Indianapolis. And for now, it's a part-time job because he still is an assistant principal at Daniel Webster School 46 in Indianapolis. And as Edmondson really, just like us, we see the value of introducing comic books to our lives and also our children's lives. Like, part of my son's reading every week is a comic book. We go to the comic book shop once a month, and I'll buy a few comic books for him that are age appropriate, and he has to read a comic book every single week because I'm trying to let him, make him aware that comic books are fun to read, but also they can teach him something as well. Like who would win in a fight, Godzilla or Superman? And that question was answered in Godzilla versus Kong versus the Justice League. That I think they just have 7 issues, but I know they'll continue. But yeah, I'm not gonna give it away. But if you read that run, that question is
Mhm.
answered. But Edmondson says children who read comics are more likely to be inquisitive and use their imagination to solve problems and explore. He says comics have become so mainstream that courses are being taught at universities and colleges, focusing on comic book philosophy and history.
Mhm.
So we just had Dr. Kiana with it on the show. What do you think about all that?
I mean, I agree with what he said that it's a barometer for cool, right? I mean, we're the cool kids, right? But now I think, like you said, it is becoming more mainstream because we have so many celebrities now. I mean, I feel like every other day a celebrity is launching a hair care line, right? And it's like that's kind of the thing now with comic books. So many people are creating comic books and graphic novels that weren't previously interested in this type of storytelling because it is a type of storytelling. And so I don't know if it's a barometer for cool, but for me, I would say it's a barometer for culture. In that comic books are here to stay. It's a significant part of American culture. Like you said, the rise of comic studies, which you talked about, like you said, with Dr. Kiana Whitted. I think it's just a sign that it's more here. It's definitely here to stay. I do wonder. if he's talking to students about like, oh, I want to get involved in comic studies when I go to college, or I want to, be an artist. And like, I think Kiana mentioned all parts of the production, not just the storytelling, even from her English perspective. But I also tell students, be mindful of the lettering, the coloring, the inking. Let's look at all these different parts and how the art tells the story as well, because that's what made comic books and graphic novels unique and stand out compared to other types of books. And I'm with you. I read comic books with my boys as well. And sometimes the more children marketed ones, they'll have the next issue on the back. And he's like, oh, mommy, are we going to go to the store and get this next one? And I'm like, sure, baby, let's talk about it tomorrow. It's time to go to bed. Like, let's go to sleep. What we're not going to do is like after every issue, we have to go buy
Uh-huh.
the next one. Let's read other ones. But I think with series, kids definitely want to read them more. And to me, like you said, it's like mixing it up, different types of books, because I read the Goosebump novels growing up. I read the Sabrina the Teenage Witch novels. I read was the Boxcar Kids, or any of the books that came, the Babysitter's Club, all the different books that had series. You wanted the next one. And I'm like, it's the same thing with comic books, kids and me grown-ups. We want
Mhm.
the next one in the series. So yeah, I'm about to put Luna part 2 in my cart, because I'm like, wait, I need the next one in the series.
Or as my mom calls it, Luna, the Queen of Myrtle.
Not Myrtle Beach,
Like,
mama.
she's
Not
like,
Maru, mama.
she was like, "Oh, you got another Queen of Myrtle book out?" And I gave her the issue 2 yesterday, and so I said, "Where's your glasses, Mama?" So she was reading it when I left. But I love her. I love my mom. Um, and she never. I don't think anybody quite understood my love for reading as I was growing up, but she did enroll me in the Fraggle Rock book club when I was 4. So she knew I loved books, but I don't think she really knew how much I loved books. Like, I was the kid that would rather go to the library than go shopping. I would rather
Yeah.
read a book than, go to the movies. Now it's not the case. Like, now I'm I'm a little bit more balanced,
Mhm.
but I was definitely that kid, a book nerd.
Yeah.
So,
Same.
um
Writing and spelling group, winning the spelling bee all through middle school and elementary school. Fall in love with poems. I mean, books they're still like adventures. You get to travel without leaving the space you're in.
mhm.
So it's definitely I tell my friends sometimes I get sad sometimes thinking about all the books I'll never get to read, because our lives are so finite. I'm like, I have like, a few more decades, and there's no way I'm gonna be able to read all the books, all the things. But they were saying it's a way to show our limitations, that we can't know everything, but that's why we meet people and talk to people, and we learn about the books they've read and the things that they know. But I'm with you, definitely bookish kid, always in the library, always spending time with the librarians. Shout out to librarians and public libraries as well, y'all. I hope y'all are checking out some of your comic books from the library, which I do. I can even get them in the drive-through. I can go on my phone and
Wow.
check out a book and then go pick it up in the drive-through, which is also very accessible. So yeah, shout out to public libraries and librarians, y'all. I think Abbott Elementary did an episode on that. And the quote that everybody shared on social media that became a meme was libraries need librarians. Like, they were trying to pilot a
Oh,
program where Cree, what's her name? Cree
Three
Summer.
Summers.
Yeah, she played the librarian, and they were trying to figure out getting her, but yeah, budget
I
challenge.
think that's I think that's wild to me that some libraries don't have librarians. That's just so it's very sad because um I don't think our school district suffers from that, but there are some school districts who taking certain things out of the schools because, quote, their budget doesn't allow for it anymore. And some schools don't have librarians, and I think that is just it's so sad because a librarian is the person that teaches you, how to find. It was the one that taught you how to find books before computers had the little and
Dewey
you open up
Decimal
the
System, the card catalog.
yeah. And we would take the little card. I don't think we could take them out though. But she would say, get the little piece of paper, write the number down. Okay, let's go find a book. And it was just so, I just loved it. And they would read to us on
Adventure, it's a
story
quest.
time. They would read to us too. So it was just, I really love our librarians. We have a really great library down the street. And last Saturday, another homeschool mom invited us to go to the Mario Kart tournament. So they have more than just books. They have like, like my son had did the Nintendo tournament last weekend. So they have more than just books. They have so many activities for families and kids. So support your local library, y'all, and your local comic book shop.